Hi, I'm Ruben from Conduction and I'm going to take some time to talk with you about OpenBuild. OpenBuild is a system, or actually an app that we built to build Nextcloud applications without actually writing any code. Okay, so what? So today we'll be talking about building apps, why you would want to do that in the first place, the manifest system, how that works, how we can build apps with OpenBuild, how we can design apps, how we can actually add business logic to them, how we can influence the data model behind them, how we can integrate with leaves and what those are, and what additional user interaction OpenBuild gives you. So let's start with the most important question. Why would you want to be building apps with an app builder in the first place instead of actually coding them? Well, an app builder gives you a couple of advantages. First of all, there's a very easy wizard to actually set up an application. You have a visual designer to make pages. You have the ability to still do dev, staging, and production builds in the same Nextcloud environment while building apps. You have a visual representation of the data layer. You can actually use template gallery for widgets that you want to use, and you can build apps completely and strictly from the apps themselves. Now this is something that we need. And why do we need this? Because we want to end up with 6,000 Nextcloud apps, or at least that's the target Nextcloud itself has given us. To do this, we need more contributors to build more apps so that we get a richer platform, which then gets more users. And we need that to get open source more broadly adopted. Now the fun thing is that if we have an app builder, then more users will also automatically mean more contributors, because every user can build apps and contribute those to the ecosystem. And that means that we have a self-enhancing and speeding up system, which we can then use to go out and conquer the world with open source. Because actually, who cares about 20,000 developers in San Francisco if you have 200,000 developers right here in Europe building and improving on your apps? Now this, of course, this started somewhere and not with the OpenBuild app. This started with a manifest system. So let's shortly dive into what OpenBuild is actually based upon. Now, we have talked about the manifest system before. There's also actually a webinar of it. You can go view that online. But it is based on seeing Nextcloud as a data layer, which contains contacts, mails, documents, files, and pretty much anything that you need if you want to build an application in the sense of both structured and non-structured data. And if we're talking about calendar items, for example, there are also figuarts. So everything's always also conformed to international standards. That makes it a very powerful integration layer. And then, of course, under this Nextcloud integration layer, there's also XWiki, Open Projects, and all these kinds of external Nextcloud apps, which you can contact through Nextcloud, meaning that it's a kind of an unlimited data layer. You can put anything in there that you want, and that means that you can put anything on top that you want. Now, that means that if you have in your CRM system a contact and you save it as a contact in Nextcloud, then you can automatically also get that contact into your calendar or in any other application. So we don't need to actually connect the applications that we build on top of Nextcloud with each other. We just need them connected with Nextcloud, and then they'll automatically share their data. Now, what the manifest system does very briefly is that it provides an API which turns Nextcloud into a grid. So that means that all placement of all menu items and all widgets and everything that you see in the UI is based on a grid system. That means that we can configure how a Nextcloud app works instead of that we need to build how a Nextcloud app works. And then of course all of these widgets feed back into the Open Register API, which then handles the integration with all other Nextcloud applications and, for example, Nextcloud tables for data storage. That means that when you're developing an app on OpenBuild, you're not actually building a new app, you're defining a delta, added functionality, added UI, added business logic to the underlying Nextcloud core. That means that most of these apps that we've built for Nextcloud using this system are actually pretty thin. But to an end user and to you, they still feel like a very tailored app because you can use very specific functionality. Okay, so let's take a look at what it takes to actually go build an app. Everything that we have in OpenBuild is actually drag and drop. It's built on top of live data, so the widgets directly get their data from OpenRegister, which then pulls all the data together from in Nextcloud. We have a lot of charge types. We have every widget type that's already available in Nextcloud. We've added some shortcut tails and some other tooling, and we can actually use group or airbag if you would to define which user can view which widgets and can do which. And we can also use airbag and compliance with the data model. So that's pretty much actually all you need to build an app. Now, starting your app is pretty easy. It's a three-step wizard, which takes a small amount of data. You just press save and you define how you want to deploy it. Do you just want a production app? Do you want a complete CI/CD process? You save the app, it takes some time creating the app, and then you're done. Okay, that's all nice, but let's take a moment to look at how we actually design apps and what are actually the possibility of apps with OpenBuild. So first of all, our manifest ecosystem is able to render quite complex and quite beautiful and richly filled dashboards, which also are clickable and can actually link you to other pages and other data. So that means that it's very easy to have something that feels like a complete app that does everything. And then, of course, all the detail pages are also, again, all a grid system on which we can place any one of those 32 widgets, meaning that we can completely customize each detail page to perfectly capture what that page needs to do. So be it a pet profile, be it something about an invoice, be it a client or a lead, we can put exactly there what the UI needs and what the user needs. But it doesn't end there. We can actually employ business logic through OpenBuild. So being able to integrate with Nextcloud Flow directly from your app is a pretty powerful feature. What you can do is you can basically select any object type or schema that you created. For example, a gift card, if you're working in the Pipelink CRM system, then you can hook into any action that happens on that specific object and attach anything that is in Nextcloud Flow. So that's, for example, create a PDF, send an email, or send a calendar invite, and have that trigger when said thing happens to your object. If you want to go beyond that, you can also use the MN models to actually go deep and dive into, for example, windmill. But this gives you very good quality adjustment to your business logic and allows you to catch most of the cases in your app. Of course, having a wonderful UI and being able to make anything you want with business logic doesn't create an app. We also need to store data and work with data because a user, of course, expects to see the same pet again the next day. So for this, we use OpenRegister under the hood. And OpenRegister allows us to actually add multiple schemas or object types, if you would, to an application. We can then alter the schema. We can make properties. We can define properties of a property. So is it nullable? Is the string? Is it immutable? Is it actually another schema? So is it a link between one property and another schema? Are there any constraints? Is there any business logic that needs to be run to validate the property is attached to group? We can also configure the schema as a whole. So we can say the schema is the extension of another schema. The schema might have a certain field that represents the schema's names or a picture of the schema so that we know how to render it in the UI. And we can also make it available in the generic search interface of Nextcloud. And lastly but not least, we can also do airbag. So we can say that specific groups have specific rights to a schema. This also works at the property level. So we can be very filtered about how the application works, and we can make the application work differently for different user groups. Another important aspect of OpenBuild is leaves. Leaves are what connects us to different Nextcloud applications, and that's all run through the OpenRegister system. Okay, so OpenRegister also allows us to integrate with other apps. One of the most awesome integrations, I think, is the email client. then it basically means that if you define in your OpenBuild that your schema, your app, your data has a connection to another application, then OpenBuild will go through that other application and try to create an interface which can connect stuff. So what we're looking at here is that there is something as a CRM package that's called PipeLink, and then that integrates with your mailbox, and you can directly assign emails to leads. And then of course, if you go to the lead detail page in your OpenBuild created PipeLink, then at the detail page you can of course have a list of all the emails that belong to that lead. And that of course allows you to very well integrate apps and create an integrated ecosystem for your users. Now, email is of course a brilliant example, but basically any Nextcloud application can be a leaf of your application, and your application can be a leaf of other applications. So the integration possibilities there are sort of endless. It's also good to know that OpenBuilds add a lot out-of-the-box functionality for you to interact with users and to improve your user interaction. First of all, OpenBuild actually uses your specifications and the way you build your app to create very rich automated user documentation, which you can then put online to have your users know how your application works. It also provides several ways for you to strengthen your ecosystem. Well, the most noticeable of these, of course, is the start model, which you get if a user and you log in for the very first time, and then you can ask users to donate to your project, tell them what your project and your team is about, reference them to your GitHub, or do anything else. And of course, as anything with OpenBuild, this first pop-up model is completely configurable. But OpenBuild goes a bit further than that. So OpenBuild has the vision that any user can be a contributor. And of course, you can pull off this stuff off if you want to. But every widget comes with an action menu. And every action menu normally always contains a link to the documentation. That could be either the documentation of your entire application or the documentation for that specific widget, meaning that you can be very granular with your instructions for users. But it also always contains the request a feature button. And the request a feature button opens a request a feature model, which then uses the local context. So where is the user? On which page is the user? What is he trying to do? And then helps the user use that information to create an issue on your actual GitHub register. So that means that users can directly request features from the inside of your application and thereby feeding the feature richness of your application. And this goes two ways. So if you label issues as feature on your GitHub, then the application can actually pull them in and create a roadmap within the application of what the application is all about. And of course, from this roadmap page, you can again, as a user, of course, request a feature or go into the donation page and see what a project is all about. OpenBuild also helps you set up wizards for administrators. So when the first time that the app gets turned on into Nextcloud, then the administrator will get the wizard, and then you can ask the administrator to fulfill certain steps, provide certain information, which that goes back into the configuration of your application. Also create very specific walkthroughs for users, and that's the first time that the user actually opens the application. You can either do a generic walkthrough and you just give some information and some models appear, but you can also take the user on a journey, asking him to push actual buttons in your application, and you can hook the walkthrough to those specific buttons, be it menu items or specific tasks or business logic in application, and then the walkthrough will actually wait until the user performs that specific action. So you can make that very interactive, and you can make a very much learning experience, onboarding kind of thing for your actual users. And that's actually already all there is to it. We try to make it very simple. We hope we have made it very simple. However, if you want to learn anything more, be advised, Conduction has an Academy page, and on that Academy page you can find many tutorials, walkthroughs, and anything else that you need to actually go work with OpenBuild. And OpenBuild actually has a very long tutorial which you can view over there, and it will very precisely explain to you how you can use OpenBuild to build an application. I hope you found it as interesting as I did, and I hope to see you again.